In the latest news broadcast, heavy rainfall has triggered flash floods in several regions, causing widespread disruption and endangering homes and infrastructure. Meteorologists are closely monitoring.
In an era marked by rapid technological progress and growing environmental concerns, sustainable consumption is a driving catalyst beyond individual choices. Thankfully, technology is playing a central role in tackling these problems. It encompasses systemic changes that promote a circular economy, efficient resource management, and a holistic approach to development. As societies strive for a balance between fulfilling individual needs and ecological preservation, the convergence of digitalization and responsible practices has given rise to a pivotal concept: digital trust. Individuals and industries are delving into the synergy of data analytics and artificial intelligence to revolutionize how we verify, track, and engage with products and services. In this endeavor, the virtual twin is poised to transcend its origins in industrial design and engineering to become a transformative tool in fostering sustainable choices. There are new challenges and opportunities. How can industries leverage the virtual twin in shaping a more informed and conscientious consumer landscape? When empowered by advanced product experiences, will consumers consistently choose sustainability? Will digitalization become a key enabler to drive trust in a new era of consumption? Can digitalization counter green hushing by enabling genuinely committed companies to regain consumer trust? Tune in and witness the engaging conversation set to unfold in the upcoming session of 3DEXCITE Live. Broadcasting live from the esteemed 3D Experience Lab in Munich on October 26th.
Hello and welcome to the 3D Experience Lab Munich for our next 3DEXCITE Live panel discussion. Sustainability is a core driver for many things we do at the System, and in our labs worldwide, we especially nurture disruptive innovation with a positive impact on the world. Yet, sustainability has become such a big word in our society. It's a field where a lot can be discussed. Therefore, I hope we'll enjoy a vivid exchange today.
Absolutely, and yes, sustainability is in our core DNA. Virtual worlds, digital twins, all of this are core components to build more sustainable products. But wait a minute, is there a chance to extend to consumers? Consumers, that's all of you, all of us, and all together we're building the world we live in. So I'm expecting a very engaging discussion, not only online, but as well here in the room. So is there at all something like sustainable consumption? What's the role of trust and how does digital play into this? Now, I want to know from the experts, so it's time to invite our moderator to the stage. And here she comes, Raj.
Hello, Raj.
Thank you. Thanks. Great. Hello and welcome to the last 3DEXCITE Live this year. Yes, we're very sad about it too, but we have a fantastic panel and a great topic tonight, so don't fret. My name is Raj Hayer, and I am delighted to be your host again this evening, where we'll be talking about sustainable consumption and how can digital trust and digital authenticity help us as consumers make better buying decisions, and what role does technology play in that? So if you feel inspired, if you're in the audience, take a photo. If you're online, take a screenshot and share it on LinkedIn. Use our hashtag 3DEXCITE Live. But without further ado, let's get the panel on stage. First, from Dassault Systèmes, we have Sustainability Marketing Director, Jonathan Dutton. Have a seat. And joining us from the Technical University of Munich, we have the CSO of Venture Labs, Dr. Lars Eiermann. And last but not least, joining us virtually, we have a project manager responsible for sustainable lifestyles, Dr. Rosalind Old. Hi, Rosalind. Now, after the brief discussion that we have, we will be taking questions, so please be prepared with your toughest questions for our panel. But in the meantime, we'll get started. So welcome and thank you for joining us. I'm going to start with the most obvious question possible. Is consumption actually sustainable? How is it sustainable? So first of all, what does sustainable consumption mean to you, Jonathan?
Well, when I first saw the title of this event, I thought it was a little bit shocking. I thought, how can these two words actually work together? So I actually just made certain I knew what sustainability meant. So, and the sustainability is actually coming from, it's a terminology which was brought around with the United Nations Brundtland Commission in 1987, which states that all activity that humans are doing now must also preserve life for future generations. There's also another way of looking at it. There is the Stockholm Resilience Centre that produced in 2009 a study around 9 planetary boundaries. And we mustn't cross any of these boundaries, otherwise we are jeopardizing human development. Unfortunately, we've already crossed 6, so we've got to rein ourselves in a little bit. And this comes to now consumption. You know, life on Earth has been consuming since the beginning of life on Earth. But the last 200 years, it's not being circular anymore. It's become linear. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And Rosalind, I'm coming straight to you because you actually work for the Collaborating Centre for Sustainable Consumption and Production, and it's been around since 2005. So this is nothing really new for you. You've been working on this for some time. So what does sustainable consumption mean to you and your team?
Yeah, indeed. It's not something that's new, but I think what's important to say is the way that we consume has changed over time. And of course, in this world that is seeing the increase of digitalization, that's seeing the urgency that you've described around climate crisis and so on, we're starting to consume in different ways. And we see that consumers are also interested in seeing how they can consume in different ways. So what we're interested in working on is actually not just thinking about it, not just talking about it, but doing something about it as well. So we do a lot of work with different stakeholders, with citizens themselves, to understand why do we behave in certain ways, how can we behave more sustainably, and how can we encourage actors to work together to create a system that enables us to live in much more sustainable ways and consume in more sustainable ways going forward. And yes. I think the key thing to say is that technology is a really key part of that in this digital age.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rosalind. Lars, you mentioned a tipping point. Would you like to expand?
Yes. First of all, I totally agree with you, both of you. I think there's a momentum of change, and we see it from the customer behavior, expectation of the younger generation especially. And on the other side, we also see opportunities in this. Yeah? On the one side, for sure, we have climate change, and we have resilience topics, all of these, but we also see opportunities for new ideas. Take, for example, the electric vehicle. 15 years ago, everyone said that's nuts. I worked long in the automotive sector, and now we see it also in the trucking industry that is running, and that it also can create profit. So we see a change, and we see a change that innovation can help if it embraces also the need of customers and their expectation to have this shift.
That's exactly what you said, Jonathan, about like the way that we're viewing it right now. It's not the right approach. There's a reason that there's greenwashing and greenhashing, and he alluded to it right there with the profit center. So yeah. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, so I think there's, some companies can be accused of greenwashing, but I look at it in a different way. I think, well, first of all, does everyone know their own environmental footprint? Have you, for example, done an environmental footprint of your own personal lives recently?
It's quite a while ago, okay, but at least I'm familiar with it.
All right, well, I did one about a year ago. So, and that helped me decide how to improve my impact on the environment. So companies are all made of people. Have all these individual people done their own environmental footprint? I don't know. Has a company done its own? As a company, has it done its own environmental footprint? Has it worked out how much emissions it's emitting directly or indirectly, or their supply chain? And so I think there is today still a tremendous lack of knowledge on what sustainability means. It's not just about climate change. Climate change is only one of the 9 planetary boundaries. Mm-hmm. So I think that companies are probably just trying to stay competitive, but they don't know how to, because they don't have the knowledge, the background knowledge, they actually don't know what to do. They don't know which action to put in place first. So scrambling around, I think. So I think this is the big change, is knowledge, then create actions, put them in place.
That's a really positive outlook, actually. I mean, I kind of go with the greenwashing route, and Rosalind, I see you nodding, so I know that you're going to talk about how we can change the perception around digital trust, because trust, we know what that means to people, but we don't know what digital trust means. And when you say that about companies, I'm like, well, that's a nice optimistic way to look at it, but I'm not sure consumers feel the same way. Rosalind, what would you say? How can we use digital trust?
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think one of the things I was thinking when you mentioned the carbon calculator as well is thinking about how we interact with technologies. So for example, maybe everyone can think about this as well. How often have you opened an app to try and do something specific, but then found that the button that you're looking for doesn't exist in the app, you know? And for me, using digital tools is a means to an end. So we're trying to do something more sustainable here. How can we make sure that those tools are designed in a way that the consumers can use them and access them in a way that works well for them and fits into their lives? And I think there comes the question of trust. Do people trust this? And there's a lot that's been happening around this, but as you see, the increase of different tools, different technologies, questions around data means that people can be quite skeptical about it and can be quite concerned about how those things are being used. And I think the trust has to come through in terms of understanding exactly what the purpose of it is, if they're collecting data, having that transparency of process, understanding where products come from and so on. And there are lots of different things happening, from digital product passports, which tell you a lot about how the product has been manufactured, where it's come from, how sustainable it is. There's lots of potential around there. But for me, it's also about how do we trust what consumers tell us about how they behave, what they want in their lives, and how they can interact with those technologies as well.
That's fantastic. And Lars, I mean, you work with startups. I think that, you know, you're speaking about something that takes a lot of traditional companies a long time to come along and say, okay, it's an ecosystem approach. We need to talk to governments, we need to talk to consumers. But I assume that startups are kind of starting ahead in that sense, that they realize that it's an ecosystem and collaboration approach. Am I making a false assumption?
No, totally agree with you. Especially for startups, it is also sometimes a bit easier because they can start from the scratch. They don't have liabilities to prevent the existing ecosystem, their employees and everything like this. So for a big company, it's not so easy to switch from one day for another. I worked long for big corporates, so I know it quite well. And for sure, a startup can always think about the next, or there's a generation behind, and really tries to disrupt if possible. Mm-hmm. And they for sure, we try to make them sure that they embrace circular economy, for example, or sustainable impact, what they are doing right from the beginning. You have to include it right, like you said, in the design phase. And it should be something that you see as an opportunity, not something where you see, for sure, in some way, we need regulations to support it. But if it's as an opportunity, you see a business opportunity in this right from the beginning, then you can create a new good, not only if you force to it. And that's in some way either, it's not an easy way, but sometimes it's more obvious for a startup than for a big corporation.
I mean, you do work for a large corporation. What were your thoughts on that?
Yes. to
put you on the spot, Jonathan.
Yeah. So I'd like to pick up on what Rosalind was saying about the digital product passport. So this is a very essential way of tracking materials through a circular economy. There's another one which is that I know that Dassault Systems are working on, which is the battery passport, which is one of the hot topics for at the moment. But I think that there is so these regulations are still just starting, and there's also the European Green Taxonomy as well, which has 6 criteria. And pretty much all products that will be sold on the European market will have to comply to these 6 criteria, which means that you have to, that it works in 2 ways. There is, as a company, you can only sell a product which complies to these, and as an investor, eventually, let's say you're an investor who wants to invest in a company that's doing something green. Well, you can actually look if they're complying to the European Green Taxonomy. Mm-hmm. But what's important as well is that these regulations, like I said, are changing, and it's how can now, I know from our point of view, Dassault Systems, how can we help our customers to stay flexible and to adapt to these ever-changing regulations? And I think that's what's really important, is to remain agile and flexible.
I see you nodding, Rosalind. Did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of that information, I completely agree. It's really important to be able to adapt, to be able to get consumers on board with that. I think there's something about how we present that information to consumers as well. How can we make it engaging? How can we make it something that's interesting? And something that we've been thinking about is, I'm sure you can all picture yourself sitting at the kitchen table, maybe having some breakfast, and you might see on a product there's maybe a QR code you can scan or some further information on it. And actually, from what we're seeing, more people are accessing that information on products as they use them rather than when they're purchasing them in some cases. And so that's quite an interesting thing, thinking about that journey over time. So will people then use that information to purchase it again? Is that something where they get more interested in one aspect? And how can we kind of like use gamification or other methods to really engage people in that longer term?
And I just want to add something. And of course, that information, people have to have the confidence that it's based on science. It's not just someone who is a company that's decided to have a stab at it, guess. We have to be able to prove that it's based on science.
And shouldn't consumers be part of that discussion? I mean, that's one thing that we all talked about in some way, level, or shape, or form.
I think, linked to both of you, I think the aspect of trust is so relevant. So the source of truth, it's not always easy to find, but to have a chance to be as trustful and as transparent as you can be, because if you have the consumer, in many cases, is more intelligent than we think, especially when we talk now of an end product. For sure, they want to have an end product that what they like, but they also want to have it in some way healthy and all those aspects. So the transparency and trust is relevant, and even more relevant for industry processes. Like you said, the battery press is one example where we also push forward because there it makes definitely sense. To overcome this overarching challenge, how can we align sustainability with generating profits? Because there is always a question, okay, first of all, a company exists to generate profits in most of the cases, I would say so. How can we align it? But take the example of the battery, for example. If you have scarce materials and you include this right from the beginning in your design process, you can have all the three. You can be more sustainable. You can avoid risk in the supply chain of scarce materials. You can also be in cost advantage, and in the best case also from the waste perspective. So the process should start from the beginning, and that is a lot of education when we build our products. On the one hand, we have to embrace the consumer, but on the other hand, we also have to understand how we can link those opportunities. I think we're all aware of the risk right now. We only have to watch the medias, but we have to look for what are the opportunities to generate new areas of business to be more regenerative.
And then just to add on that, you know, there's a nice statistic or fact that 80% of a product's environmental impact is locked in right in the beginning design phases. The beginning phase of designing and engineering is locked in. So if a product lasts for 20 years, like a truck, or like 40 years, like an aircraft, or a ship, or even something much smaller, 80% is locked in the initial design phases. So you see how important the initial phases are.
I'm going to come back to you on that one. Rosalind, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, just linking a few of those points together. I think you're quite right in saying that we need to kind of involve the consumers. And I think one of the ways you can do that right from the start is actually involving them in the design process. So, for example, a project that we've worked on has designed a lifestyle test, which is quite similar to the carbon calculator you mentioned at the start there. But we used a sort of citizen science living labs methodology where the citizens were involved right from the start in kind of giving input on what this could look like, what sort of questions could be asked. Then it got adapted and updated. Then they tested the technology again. They could give us real feedback as the ultimate end users of this to say, actually, this isn't realistic, or this is something we would use it for as a consumer. And I think that there are lots of methodologies. You just have to fundamentally first believe that the citizens have a valuable contribution to make in that design phase as well.
I totally agree with you. I would even go one step ahead. Our aim at Convention Lab is to bring great research, faster to commercialize product, that they can create a positive impact, to keep it really, really short. And if you, for sure, many startups are started because they want to set an impact. But if you take every R&D department you're referring to, if the user experience to create a sustainable product and the understanding there right from the beginning, and you have the transparency and you have the trust in this, for sure this helps. Normally they are not motivated like this. If you push this in and you show the opportunity, it should be as easy, I don't know, as using a simple smartphone app or something like this.
I love that idea because, quite frankly, I think it is the consumers that can be sometimes lazy. Let's face it, we know that there's a footprint to ordering something and having it delivered the next day, and yet we'll continue to do it because it's easy.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think regulations are necessary, but we will not change consumers only due that we have 1,000 of pages of regulations. If you, for corporates, maybe they can handle it. If you go to smaller companies and you see regulation, it can also be sometimes a burden. So move to the opportunity when you can create it. Do it right from the start. Simplify it. Simplification and show opportunities to have a sustainable business is the way to go forward. And he mentioned in the beginning all the reasons why there will be, if it is in resilience, if it is in climate action, if it is in resources, we will have enough areas to act in.
Yeah. Rosalind.
Yeah, I was going to say a really nice opportunity to tackle that of citizens maybe not making the best choices in terms of the environmental footprint and so on at certain points, is to have that kind of multi-stakeholder approach and really think about how we can connect that individual behavior, individual interaction with technologies and so on with the wider system. And I think we mentioned systems, I think all of us at the start, and really thinking about how you engage the different stakeholders that can use levers at different parts of the supply chain, at different parts of regulation and the environment that people make choices, to really bring that through so that really those individual behaviors then join up to have a much bigger impact across the sector.
We hear too often as well that, industry is the reason that we're in this mess to begin with. But as you said, Jonathan, technology is the reason we'll get out. This is a fundamental thing I think that a lot of people on the panel believe. Would you expand on that?
Yeah, so people blame industry for a lot, but we wouldn't be sitting here in this room, we wouldn't be wearing the clothes, we wouldn't be having the health we have today or the food in our homes if we didn't have industry. Clearly, industry has also been created because we have abundant energy, we have abundant resources. That's changing. So now industry needs to rewrite itself. And I think but industry is still stumbling, like I mentioned before. And I think the classic example, because I really want to give an example of what you were both saying, a classic example of a new service or a new experience that hasn't worked is micro-mobility as a service in, for example, like large cities like Paris. There were a lot of electric kick scooters. I know they're being banned in some big cities. And this is a classic example of one company coming in, invading pavements with these kick scooters. And then, but the consumers weren't involved, the cities weren't involved, various of the service providers weren't involved that are doing regular public transport. So I just think this is a classic example of how it shouldn't be done.
Yeah, I would agree. I'm not a fan. But Rosalind, you mentioned actually exactly on that note about including citizens in society, because every city is different. I think you alluded to this earlier as well. Every city is different, every society is different. And isn't there something researchers are doing with citizens of particular cities to test?
Yeah, so I think one of the methodologies you can use here is citizen science. So for citizen science, you can really work, so researchers hand in hand with citizens as researchers in a way, to gather data on specific issues in a local area. And that does sometimes apply to situations like mobility. It can be to do with pollution. It can be to do with nature and ecosystems, lots of different things across that spectrum. And the idea is that you explore a topic or a need, a challenge in a local area. It can be at various scales, but mostly in the local area. And then citizens will then collect that data, observations, things they see around them, collect it together and then analyze it and see, okay, where are the solutions? How can we take that forward? And it does work best where you have those other stakeholders engaged right from the start as well. So if the municipality, for example, is already on board from the start saying, yes, we want to implement something to change this, to improve it from the start, and local businesses and so on, then you can really lead to some concrete change.
This is a great example, and I think this is where we can see, hopefully, this is a dream of mine, hopefully a harmonization between different industries. You know, in the life science industry, or when new pharmaceuticals are coming out or being developed, they have to go through a vast amount of clinical trials. And generally it's about 10 years to go through these clinical trials. So this is being now digitized, thankfully, and we've managed to bring out, incidentally with one of our solutions, the COVID vaccine. We helped a number of different companies bring out the COVID-19 vaccine in a really fast time. But these clinical trials are basically, the fact that they're digitized, we can give people from all around the world, different ethnic minorities, different countries, can put their data into various apps, and we can now understand how people are reacting to these drugs. So that's just a drug, not just a drug. But what about a new mobility service? You know, what about a new product? So I think it would be great to see this new way of validating with the consumer directly in the loop.
I do want to come back to that data and ethics piece because I think that's very important. But initially, I wanted to ask you about the circular economy because we talked about how you don't think we're actually far enough on that journey yet. And I'd like you to expand on that and maybe even describe what circular economy is for those people who don't know.
I think Jonathan addressed it a bit in the beginning, jumping from a linear business model more to the circular business model. I would even go stronger. I would think about, we have to think about how can we regenerate. So ecosystems where we regenerate something out of it. We live in times which are really, really challenging for several reasons. And the best thing is, if you think about whatever you do, you regenerate something or that you improve the ecosystem. So finally, when we do something, it is always linked to a local thing because you have different challenges. If you take the climate, for example, now in South Italy, then in Middle Italy, or in Canada, or in Australia, if I talk to flood, firestorms, or whatever it is, you have other things. So how can you regenerate something? It can be in agriculture, it can be in living, it can be whatever. So there, for sure, digital helps a lot because you know you got the transparency what it's all about. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing, how can we come from a linear model where we generate profit normally directly in the beginning to a more circular one? To be honest, you have to embrace circular economy, and that is only working if you think in partnerships. Circular economy will not work if you work single. It's not working. There is more or less not one company who can cover the whole thing. You need to think in partnerships, and you have to embrace this, how you generate in the total more than you do it in a singular model where you more or less compete in the whole supply chain against the others.
Yeah, well, I like to sort of say in supply chain, which sounds very linear, I like to say a value network where everyone has the same, can find their own value within a network. So one person's, let's say, byproduct or waste is another person's input or nutrient. And no one is losing out.
And if you see this from a regenerative aspect, so the request of the ecosystem, and you in some way do it human-centered design, because to be honest, in the end, in some way we do it for mankind. For sure, we also do it for the planet, but in the end, how can humanity live in it, and how can they enjoy it, how can they like it? And if you bring this together, innovation technology, thinking about generating value out of a circle, and this linked to the ecosystem and the people that live in, that is at least most of the story.
Go ahead, Rosalind.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And I think on a very practical level, I think there's so many opportunities with technology to really assist people to be able to live in a way that respects the circular economy more. For example, if you think about products, we talked about digital product passports, information on products. One thing we see is that information on its own doesn't necessarily lead to behavior change. So there has to be a kind of like practical enabling of a certain behavior. And for example, if you can find out on a product actually how it can be recycled, how it can be repaired, where you can do that, that gives you one step further towards actually enacting that behavior and actually making sure that that product stays in that loop and is reused again. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
I was actually at a 3D experience conference last week, and there was a startup there that was called AES, and they're basically taking all of the plastic that can't be recycled and then breaking it down into oil so it can enter the economy again. And I thought that's fantastic. That's what startups should be doing, right?
Yeah, for sure, waste to value is always something to look on. Maybe in the first place, if we can avoid recycling, then it would even be better.
Yes, design it out in the first place.
But you can see it from so many perspectives. Take a look on long-term assets. Take a building. If you have a digital transparency of a building, and I work close with science, I believe we can do this in some day. It's tricky. Maybe it's easier right now for a smartphone or something like this. But if we have transparency, and you know how much this asset costs and how long it lasts, then you know how you have to adapt in time. You need the transparency and you need the trust. So digitalization and modern sensor techniques and understanding of it to build twins of it will really help to say, okay, not only from the investor's perspective, okay, what is really the value of what I'm buying, also what has to be adapted in the future. So there are things which will help out there, and innovation and technology will push us forward.
For example, you take a virtual twin of a wind turbine that's been designed for particular, let's say, 3 or 4 strong gusts of wind a year at a certain scale. Well, what happens if there is maybe 5 or 6 gusts? How do you change the maintenance schedule of that wind turbine? Well, first of all, because you've got this wind turbine in a virtual twin, you can then do simulations. You can actually simulate how this has changed. Has it damaged the structure? Do you have to bring in a new team with more frequent maintenance?
And think about this of our whole ecosystem. Think about this if this would be possible for a city. We will go into times where we have much more unpredictable weather conditions. What will it mean? How can we adapt? For sure, in some way, it's also a bit freaking me what digital might come to, combined with AI. But on the other, it offers us so many opportunities to react, to handle on this, and to help societies.
Isn't it like the basis, though, is that consumers need to trust it, right? And they need to want to share their data. There is ethics involved. And as you know, we're in Germany, and, you know, we have very strict data laws in Germany. Rosalind, you had mentioned this in your discussion we had previously. And for myself, like, you know, the regulations sometimes don't help. I'm a global citizen, and I have a medical file in Canada, in the UK, in Germany. I have to explain the whole history every single time. And I would love if they just gave me the trust, you know, from this side to say, hey, share it. Go ahead and share it. I want people to learn from it. You know what I mean? So, Rosalind, could you expand on that piece?
Yeah, I think it's a really important point, this part about data ethics, how people share their data. I think, firstly, there's so much power in data. And as you said, if we can start sharing it in ways that benefit all of us, then that's really productive. It's just that people have some sort of concerns sometimes around sharing of data. And I think some of that comes back to control. So understanding and making it clear to citizens that they have some element of choice around it, I think is really important. So being transparent about the purpose of the data, what it'll be used for, and so on, and then giving them options potentially for levels of sharing, or how they can choose to share in certain ways, it really helps them to feel comfortable in making a decision, giving informed consent for how that data is used in the future. So I think there's a lot to be said about that. And in one of our projects, we had different living labs in different countries across Europe. And even in the different countries in Europe, you can see there were very different attitudes to what people felt comfortable sharing or what felt too personal in different countries.
You mentioned a life cycle assessment. How does that play into this, or does it play into this?
Yes, well, I just wanted to touch on quite an extreme example of trust as well. Please. Is that before I go into life cycle assessment, there is, you know, for example, if you want to feel safe in a car, it's generally, you see how many stars it has for crash testing. It goes through regulations anyway. So would you believe that car would resist a crash test if it actually never did one physically as a prototype? Would you believe that it was just if it was done virtually? Well, actually, this is happening now. Mm-hmm. You know, cars still have to have a final crash test of validation, but now 90% of all the testing and the simulation is done in a virtual twin, and this is because it's all based on science. You know, and
it's a lot less waste.
Well, it's a lot less waste. It means that you can actually deliver a safer product to the market much quicker. You're not using crash tests to actually do the engineering. You're doing a physical crash test just to certify, and that's it. All the engineering is done in a virtual twin. And so this is where technology is ultra powerful for the safety of people. And but going to but taking that to another level is how do you know that your car that's passed a crash test, how do you know that how do you know if you can lower its footprint? Well, this is even more information that designers and engineers and scientists have to work with. So we're actually providing we're actually built in a life cycle assessment into our 3D Experience platform now. And it means that at designers and engineers' fingertips, they can access the information on materials, on how much CO2 a product will produce, how many liters of water a manufacturing process will do, what's the soil toxicity as well, across the life cycles, the different life cycles of a product. So this is, as you were saying last before, we have to provide people. I'm talking about professionals more than consumers in this case, with tools, technology that allows them to make good decisions quickly based off scientific facts that are coming from tools such as life cycle assessment, but which is now providing so much more information which can be confusing. So we're simplifying this, providing a cleaner environment, and so that we can get radically new sustainable products on to the market as fast as possible, because we literally don't have the time to do iterative designs, put a product onto the market, see how it works. Doesn't work, oh dear, we'll make another one. Can't do that anymore. Absolutely. We only have until 2040 to get down to climate neutrality. 2050, sorry.
I think I would like to add one thing. I think the real challenge to companies like yours, but also to startups, is we have to bring clarity into complexity there. Because, like I said, regulations are necessary and good, but in many cases it is a lot of complexity, and it's difficult for startups, for mid-sized companies, as for big ones, to do this shift. And at either the user experience is for a developer or an engineer, either it goes. It will not only work if you just do it with penalties. That's for sure. You can run it, and you can force companies and you force the C-level with it, but it should be more. So it should be part of our daily DNA to go in the most sustainable way as possible and to make it as easy as possible.
Yeah, that's easy and simple. I think that's the things that jump out the most, especially for consumers, because I know there was a citizen group that used the science for, I think, even a digital twin for energy consumption and analyzing it in their own hometown. Is that right, Rosalind?
Yeah, I think it's an idea that's emerging as well, and like in terms of how you can map out different things that citizens want to work with or want to do together. Energy is one field. I think in terms of the way that citizens can interact, there's so much potential, because it's about that collaborative approach. It's about gathering all the different sources and perspectives and pieces of information, as you said, but being able to do that in a virtual world creates so much more of a network that you can bring in. I think especially in terms of citizens, we can really tackle some of those barriers to using different products, to consuming different products in that phase, and using the digital twin as well in terms of personalization, overcoming certain usability barriers, understanding the trends and what people's preferences are. I think one thing I would say that could be a potential challenge with this is that as we see in this world, we're quite often overwhelmed with information. There's so much that can be stored in these, and it's about how can we make that presented to citizens in a way that is giving them what they need, what they're interested in, that's tangible, that's immersive. We can do a lot with gamification here as well, I think, in terms of how we do that in a playful way that's not just a list of written information, but it's something really tangible, even though it is virtual.
And I like what you said, Jonathan, about, you can make mistakes when it's virtual. You can make mistakes, you can learn from them, and you can develop again. And I saw something at the Conference of Innovation and Sustainability with 3D Experience, where there were 200,000 moving parts on this digital twin that they had. And I'm thinking, well, they could never have done that in real life. Like, they couldn't have tested it, right?
Yeah, exactly. imagine making mistakes in the real world, how expensive it is, how it could cost lives. And if you do it in a virtual world, it's hardly costs anything. You know, compared with putting factories in place, compared with catastrophic failure in the real world. So exactly, I agree with you.
Excellent. So we are going to take questions in just a moment, but I just want to talk about a little bit about, with Lars, the intelligence of the customer. Do you feel that this is coming up as part of the education system or part of the startups that you're working with, where you can assume a level of intelligence of consumers, or do you have to still teach them to use the products? Like, what's happening there?
Yeah, on the one side, if we talk about end customers, it is really difficult to understand this jungle. If you take a simple food product or a complex tech product, or what does it even mean? It's not easy. So simplicity is definitely something which should help. And like I said, trust and transparency. And if consumers really understand that, maybe if you take the invention of the banana from a banana to a bar, and then in 2023 realize, okay, the banana was maybe the better product. So it should be in some way trustful what you consume. It's really a simple example right now. But what can education play? I'm with you a bit more. We have to understand consumers. We have to understand their desires and what they're looking for, and it's definitely different in different markets. But on the other side, we have to help everyone who creates products to think from the beginning on, how can I fulfill the customer's demand, or maybe even not existing demand, potential demand in the future, with the most sustainable approach, and making profit on the other side as well. And I think there the education is much more relevant, and their startups for sure can be a good blueprint, because they can start from the scratch, and normally they don't have to, they can use innovation in the best way they're right now, and maybe in 10 years future then it's the next generation. So the innovation, use tech and innovation with a link to ecosystem and mankind, and to learn from it every time, it can only help, and it's the only chance to help out. So look the opportunity. For sure there are risks, but look for the opportunity in it to bring us to the next level. Like you said in the beginning, health increases. We had other disadvantages. Yeah. And yeah, for sure, if you want to have trust, we talked about before about data, for example, there is always the limit. There is a private comfort zone where you don't want to be. It's different for different people. Some put everything online, others not. But there is a zone you have to respect. And then everything around there, you should avoid fraud as much as possible. And there are some people on the planet maybe who act not in the best interest of mankind. So use mechanism to ensure trust. But then use innovation to work with it.
But trust isn't just with consumers, though. It's also within an organization and within an ecosystem. So you have to be able to have a single source of truth as well, somewhere where you can all find the right information.
I'm going to take us to questions, but I really like the use of the technology, because you'll be providing that technology to the startup. So questions. Do we have a question from the audience? Anybody in the audience? Quick question? No? There we go. He's going to bring you a mic.
Since we're all consumers and we're all in this together, what is the easiest way to go about assessing your personal carbon footprint? Because I'm interested. I'd like to do that.
Yeah, we mentioned a couple. Do you want to take that, Jonathan?
Yeah, so this, I know the ones in France. And they're, because each country is different. You know, France, for example, if you wanted to know when you heat your house, maybe with electric radiators, if you were to measure that impact in France, it wouldn't be the same in Germany. There are different ways of generating electricity in Germany than there is in France. So you can't compare them completely. You could probably do it for food, for example. But yes, I would invite you to look on the internet for your own country. That's the most important thing. Every country is different. And some cities even have it as well.
Fantastic. And Rosalind, you had an answer to that?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I completely agree. It's very country specific in terms of the actual footprint. The project that we've been working on has done that on a European basis, but with different countries. So there are tests out there, as you said, and some of them will be able to give it in terms of different sectors. So, for example, the one we worked on can give you your footprint in terms of housing, mobility, food, and other general consumption as well. And you're starting to see more of these tests in the market that then take it a step further and say, okay, here are some actions you can take. Here's how you can develop a plan to really make it concrete and something that works in your own life. So I'd really, encourage you to have a look and see what's out there.
Small decisions, big impacts.
Maybe I can add one thing on this. I totally agree with you. When I was in automotive, I've done this for big truck as well. And for sure, it's different if you ride a truck in Poland with a lot of energy coming from the coil, and if you go to Norway, there is a difference. But I would not focus only on CO2 or greenhouse gases. It is more. It is also the aspect about resources in general. So it is a bit about. I like those tools. They help a lot to see where you can shift and what impact it has, how many times you fly, or if you take a car, whatever you do. But in total, it is a bit. The most important thing is to give your voice to the right people who are pushing innovation with a focus on clean tech. That's the first thing, because that's the strong thing what citizens, from my perspective, can do to push the majority in the right direction. And we see a strong shift. You can't see it everywhere in the world so far, but there we see. The second thing is what I do personally, for sure, to have a bit of balance. And it's sometimes so obvious. How much waste do you create? How inefficient are you? Even if you drive an electric vehicle, that's nice. But this is still about energy efficiency. The energy has to come somewhere. We have not unlimited renewables. So how efficient are you in the things you are doing, and how much waste you create? So I think there are some things which everyone can say, okay, tomorrow maybe it's just a little step. I would adapt a bit, but. To close it, I would not put all the burden on the final consumer. For sure, they buy the products and they are the voice of the people. It is also a big burden on R&D to deliver products, if it is in food, if it is in mobility, if it is in energy or whatever, to enable consumers to go the right way. And maybe in the beginning it is a bit of premium in price because you shift. But in many cases it's not. Solar is the cheapest energy on Earth. There is nothing which is cheaper right now.
And I think that's interesting, because you can make an effort on your own personal footprint, but it's around 25 to 30%. If everyone had made a good effort, we'd only solve 30% of the problem maximum, at least for climate change. The rest is coming from industry. It's coming from local services from your town. It's coming from roads, lamps. It's coming from how we manage our own waste. So it's also about, because you look, again, I go back to what I said at the beginning, is the knowledge is everything. It helps you make better decisions for yourself. It helps you make better decisions when you're at work. Helps you make better decisions when you vote, for example. So that's the key, knowledge.
And for sure, from my perspective, if you can and have, always support innovation and support young startup teams, because this is a chance. Like saying, the existing generation normally can't solve the problem. The existing generation in lead can only enable the next generation and step away one day to give them the chance.
Well, actually, what I love about the 3D Experience Lab where we are is that they do enable startups to use the 3D Experience platform to then simulate what they're trying to create, right, Jonathan? That's part of, I think, what you're bringing to the table as Dassault.
Yeah, exactly. So it's being able to use our 3D Experience platform, which is a science-based platform, where we have life cycle assessment built in. So we are providing the knowledge, and also because of the lab, we are helping, assisting these startups. So we're also providing the know-how as well, so they can move forward faster.
Great. I do want to take a couple more questions if we can. So, Els, do we have anybody online who's asking a question?
Yes, we have a couple of questions. So, linking back to the decision-making process and how people's purchase decisions are often driven by commercial motivation. If via the digital twin we can measure the total environmental impact, should we factor in the ecological cost to incentivize behavior?
You go first, and then we'll come to you.
Well, I would say good design means that you wouldn't have to. And maybe there is a transition period where there's a cost, but ultimately good design would be inherently more environmental.
Yeah.
You design out waste. You design in
great.
circularity.
I would love that. Go ahead.
I think that is a perfect answer, to be honest. But maybe on the way to it, like same with regulations, you need some incentives to also push markets around.
Of course, yeah.
You need them. You also the shift, for example, to reduce the emissions in mobility, regulation and penalty or supports help. So for sure, we have a problem that we don't include external costs. We have it. We have it. It is there, and it was there. It is there for since humans exist. You can go back in history, you see it whatever aspect, and I'm not sure if we can really solve this. Maybe this is in our DNA, but at least we should try to bring it on the table, make it transparent, and really show the things. And with two young kids. For me, it's obvious you have a responsibility for future generations. So I don't expect from everyone now to become vegan and only ride with a bicycle. But think
that
about.
Wouldn't be so bad.
Yeah, maybe we will solve the food thing also from another perspective. But think a bit about what you can do in the way to have a multiplier. So if you only, like we said before, it's the least thing is to have the vote for the right things, and the second thing is where you can be a multiplier to activate people to look for the opportunities to combine with sustainability.
Rosalind, I want you to get quick answer in there.
Very interesting discussion, and I think it kind of echoes or links to some recent debates that have certainly been happening in Germany. When you think about food and the cost of food, like meat versus plant-based alternatives and so on. And I think what I would say on that is there are lots of different factors influencing consumer behavior, and some of them are barriers that are really not related to the individual, but more to the system. It might be to do with money, might be to do what they afford, what time they have available to make purchases and so on. So I think that really shows a link that this has with the wider system. And of course, there are many, many questions on who should kind of bear the cost of things. How do you do it? Is it through supply and demand and so on? So it's really a complex issue and one that causes a lot of debate, I think.
And I think we can all agree everyone should be paying attention to this. Producers, suppliers, consumers, etc. Let's go ahead.
And I think that's what I like about startups. They, like I said, they can start from innovation directly, and sometimes companies which may have been innovative years ago and may have been a startup years ago now try to protect the existing ecosystem. I can understand it, and I can understand that they have that protect their profit. But to be honest, most of the top wealthiest companies right now on the planet were not existing or were not so rich 20 years ago. Yeah, so you see a really dynamic market. So be open for the change and look for the opportunities. And it's, to be honest, like I said in the beginning, climate action, the resilience in any way, and how to treat with resources or take the planetary boundaries. It's also really good to work with. There will be so many opportunities to work with this, but it will appear anyhow.
I just had a tiny comment. Okay. So I know you work with startups, and I know we do as well, but we also work with big multinational companies. And I think that startups, when we see, for example, the circular economy, we see a lot of great examples from startups, but we need it to be scalable. We need to scale this, and it's only by combining the talents of both these types of organizations that we can make it achievable, scalable, and at the end, and ultimately profitable, because otherwise business will just stop.
I can't agree more. And
exactly.
With 11 years in corporate, I can't agree more. And it is more than a startup. It is maybe the startup can be the starting point to push, or it can be something else. But you have to have the shift in the whole industry. And there we need, like you said, we need more digital transparency, we need more trust, and we need the call to action that this is an opportunity.
Yeah, I've seen great collaborations between the two at this recent conference. I do want to try to take one more question, but maybe we just one person answering if we've got one. Do we have one? Another question?
No one from the audience?
Yeah. So maybe from the online?
What are your thoughts on many consumer products and experiences that are using heavy data processing and AI solutions nowadays? and use a lot of water and power as well.
I'm gonna stop us from going into AI because we only have a couple of minutes left. But sorry, so what was the first part? Was about using technological advancements?
Yeah, lots of power and water.
Ah, I see. From the back end. Okay, Jonathan, I'm gonna give you 1 minute to answer that, and then I'll cut you off.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go on.
How can I answer that? So, yeah, whatever we do, we consume energy. So whether it's data, I mean, for example, digital. We call it digital, but it's actually hardware. We have our smartphones, we have our computers, but it's all hardware. We say digital, but it isn't really. It's servers, it's cloud servers, etc. So there will always be a balance to find, and this is why when we see our objective to be climate neutral or net zero by 2050, it means that we will always produce some CO2, but we have to find a way to find the balance. And I think that is the massive challenge by 2050, to find this balance.
Actually, we've got to carry on. I'm so sorry. You can give a final thought. I promise. But actually, since we're on you anyway, Jonathan, why don't you give us a final takeaway that you want the audience to leave with, and then I'm going to let you do that after Rosalind. Go ahead.
Yeah. So my final takeaway, on a personal note, I've got 2 boys, 18 and 20. One's studying engineering. The other one's auto mechanics. And I've said to them, you may not be doing this in 10 years' time. You may be doing something completely different. We actually do not know what the world will look like in 30 years. So be adaptable, be flexible, and be ready for change. Embrace the change. And so that's on a personal note. On a professional note, we've spoken about technology. We've spoken about virtual twins. I really want this to be on the strategic agenda of business decision makers, because we've just spoken about it, is critical. It's critical for us to embrace sustainable consumption.
Great, thank you so much. Rosalind, what are your final words to the audience?
Final words. I think I would say trust has to go both ways. So for me, it's about, of course, companies are looking to find the trust of consumers, and that makes sense. But of course, we have to also make sure that companies, organizations also inherently trust consumers to have a valuable input in the process, and that actually that collaboration, that coming together across the whole lifestyle cycle of a product, the whole cycle, is really important for that future of sustainable digitalization.
Great, thank you so much, Rosalind. And I did cut you off, so you go ahead, Lars. Now you can say what you want to say.
I will answer on the online maybe later.
Okay.
Two things. The one thing I think, even in challenging times right now, we have to collaborate and understand globally. That's the key. It's not one country against another, one company against another, especially in circular. So we have to understand and we have to collaborate globally. Maybe we have to act locally. That might be right. That's the one thing, and we have to look for these partnerships. And this is also where I see big change now in the university network where we work together. And the other one, I'm standing for sustainability, I'm standing for clean tech, but it's always two things. Also create a fantastic user experience. It will not work if you only put the sustainable logo on it. You have to create a fantastic user experience. And if you combine the two, then it is a way forward. Then it is a step forward. And the user experience can be for professional or it can be for an end consumer.
That's fantastic. And of course, we need to understand it. So we do have another minute because we went too fast now. I'm getting like signaled in the background. So now I cut you off and now I've got another minute. So is there any last thoughts from anybody? Rosalind, how are you doing over there?
Yeah, I think one thing I was going to say a little bit earlier on was actually thinking about this this collaborative approach as well in terms of the citizens and how to actually bring them into the development of products as well. And I think that thing is about how can we work together, make sure that the information that we're sharing is the most vital stuff to lead to that behavior change. And really, what's really struck me today is how we combine that individual behavior with the wider system, how we get all the different actors on board, and how we really make sure that even though sometimes it's difficult to have those different perspectives coming together and different agendas, different goals, find a way through that, because that's the way that you have to tackle systemic problems.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I think that that is it for our last 3DEXCITE Live for this year. So thank you so much to the 3D Experience Lab for this fantastic venue. Thank you so much to the technical team that's behind the scenes that you don't see, and they're running around doing everything to make sure that we can deliver this live. Thank you for our great panelists who have delivered such great insights and the engagement from the audience. I think we were so eager to answer all the questions that we only got through a couple, and then we're going to have to answer all the ones online later. So thank you so much. Keep creating, keep innovating for a sustainable future, and we'll see you next year. Thanks so much.